Act 1, Scene 2, page 35. So Miranda's monologue: if by your art, my dearest father, you have put the wild waters in this roar, allay them. The audience discovers that it is Prospero who has developed the storm. Now, we also understand Miranda's relationship with Prospero as well. That's established. She's got some imagery there. If you don't need to highlight it, just do like a little bracket for the next lines. The sky, it seems, would pour down the stinking pitch, but that sea mounting on the welcome's cheek dashes the fire out. Just imagery. Why have they used such strong imagery just in this section? So the audience could imagine the extent of,
The full extent of the storm.
Yeah, the full extent of the storm, how like tempestuous it was and how it raged and dashed the ship to pieces, and also it highlights the verisimilitude of the storm because Miranda was an onlooker and she believed it. So that's the extent of his power. So imagery highlights the extent of the storm to audience. I have suffered with those that I saw suffer. A brave vessel who had no doubt some noble creature in her dashed all to pieces. So again, do a bracket from "oh, I have suffered" to "dashed all to pieces." So is Miranda a nice girl?
She's very compassionate.
She's very compassionate. Okay, she's got a lot of empathy. So highlights Miranda's empathy. So highlights Miranda's empathy and compassion. Also highlights the verisimilitude of the storm because she believes the ship to be sunk. Same thing, oh, the cry did knock against my very heart. Poor souls, they perished. Had I been any god of power, I would have sunk the sea within the earth. We've also got emotive language.
That entire excerpt?
Yeah. Oh, in that, up until sunk with the earth. But pretty much the whole thing has emotive language in it. It's got metaphor, personification, calling it a brave vessel.
Do those techniques actually relate to discovery, or are they just one? Because that's what's hard about it, is there are all these techniques, but not all of them.
Yeah, no. So this is related to discovery because the audience has the discovery about Prospero and Miranda's relationship and the fact that Prospero calls the storm. So we discover his power, but she also discovers the whole Tempest. She discovers that this ship, how many ships would she have seen? Probably not that many, because she's never really seen anyone. So it's a discovery for Miranda as well. Imagine never seeing something, well, we could probably imagine never seeing something like that, because I've certainly not seen something like that. And how that's affected her. That discovery was probably more of an emotional discovery for her. Like it's got physical aspects because she saw it. But that's something that she's internalized because she said, poor souls, they perished. I have suffered with those that I saw suffer. So that's her discovery there as well. Again, we discover her personality. It's in sharp. Like, how much of a contrast is Miranda to Antonio and Sebastian? Like, not even in the same league. So these characters are established strongly and they're established early. So we know immediately what they're like. We immediately know that Prospero is powerful. We don't know anything about his personality yet. Maybe he's a bit vengeful. But we know about Sebastian and Antonio and Miranda. And Gonzalo, we're still a bit on the fence about Gonzalo because he's not been that clear cut just yet. But yeah, okay, so you just got to think, I would put the quote first and find the technique later. Instead of going to try and find techniques, I would try and find quotes and then see if I can marry some kind of technique with them. How about that? Does that make a bit more sense? Yeah. Okay, all right. Prospero says, be collected, no more amazement. Tell your piteous heart there's no harm done. So can you highlight, tell your piteous heart there's no harm done? Discovery that all are safe. The storm was an illusion. Tell your piteous heart is personification as well. More should know did never meddle with my thoughts. 'Tis time I should inform thee, father. Lend thy hand and pluck my magic garment from me. Pluck my magic garment from me. Can you highlight that? It's near the bottom. And also, can you highlight Lie there, my art. So, what impression do we get?
That he's only magical when he wears this cloak.
Yeah, that the cloak is a symbol of his power. And lie there, my art. So he's personifying it as well. And my art is a metaphor. So it's both metaphor and personification.
Also weird that like he speaks of it fondly. He's just
Yeah, it is part, it's an extension of who he is,
Yeah.
but he reveres it as well.
And it's just how it's like good because Miranda also called it an art, not like a
Yeah.
magic.
Yeah, so art, it's white magic, not
And
black.
yeah, and I think he said like cigarettes was like a something, not like an art. But, like,
Yeah, it was like evil,
Yeah,
devil,
and they call it
that
like an
kind of.
art, like it's good.
Yeah, because it's something he studied as well, it's something he's developed. Yeah, excellent. So it's an extension of himself, revered, spoken highly of, art. But also art is, in a way, illusion. A painting's an illusion because we think that we're looking at a scene, but we're looking at blobs of paint on a piece of board or a piece of canvas. Art is all an illusion. When we're looking at a statue, it's in the shape of a man, but we're not looking at a man. We're looking at a piece of marble. You know what I mean? So art equals illusion. White thou eyes, have comfort, that direful spectacle of the wreck, which touch the very virtue of compassion in thee. I have such provisions in mine art, so safely ordered that there is no soul, no, not so much perdition as a hair, but tied to any creature in the vessel, which thou heardst cry, which thou sawest sink. Sit down, for thou must know, Father. Can you highlight virtue of compassion in thee? Miranda equals symbol of virtue. Because that's important for a feminist critique if you want to pursue that line of argument further. Her virtue is like emphasized to no end. That's pretty much how she's referred to in anything. So he reinforces the fact that no one was harmed. You've often begun to tell me what I am, but stopped and let me to bootless inquisition, concluding, stay, not yet. The hour is now come, the very minute bids thee open thy ear. Obey and be attentive. Canst thou remember a time before we came unto this cell? I do not think thou canst, for then thou wast not out 3 years old. So we get the impression that she's about to discover something for the first time. Miranda says, "'Tis far off, and rather like a dream than an assurance that my remembrance warrants. Had I not 4 or 5 women that once tended me?" So this section, Miranda's little piece, just write rediscovery of something forgotten.
Rather like a dream.
Yeah, rather like a dream. And it's a simile as well. 12 years since, Miranda, 12 years since, thy father was the Duke of Milan and a Prince of Power. Highlight that line. So we have a discovery of Prospero's past for audience and Miranda.
Discovery for audience, rediscovery for Prospero.
Yeah, it could be a rediscovery for Prospero.
He's remembering something that was not
Yeah.
but suppressed.
Yeah, and Miranda, I think it would be a discovery for her because you would think, and a 3-year-old wouldn't really understand that he was the Duke. So I would say it's a first-time discovery for her. Prospero's past for Miranda and audience. Rediscovery for Prospero. Why has he repeated 12 years since?
To emphasise the amount of time it's been.
Excellent. Petition to emphasise the amount of time passed. Father was the Duke of Milan and a Prince of Power. So he's referring to himself in the third person. Why do you think he could be referring to himself? Why does he say I
Because
was?
he was at one stage the Duke of Milan, but no longer is, and therefore it's in the past, and so is that.
Yeah, so his identity,
He's lost his identity or that identity.
Yeah, he's lost that. So third person, thy, circle thy, third person, loss of identity, just past. Duke of Milan and a Prince of Power. We've got alliteration, metaphor. And what's probably a little bit ironic about that line, Prince of Power, Prince of Power,
He's already got power.
his power has
Developed furthermore.
developed to another level where he's got power over their elements. His power is of a magical, supernatural power rather than a political power. And in the Tempest, when the men were all like, oh, we were dying, what power was more powerful?
Magical.
Yeah.
The magical power, because the lords had their political power, and what use was that?
Nothing.
Nothing. So he's transcended to a higher level of power. So
But was he
transcended.
a Prince of Power, like when he came? Because like they're still talking that he was the Duke of Milan and a Prince of Power. But like, so was he like magical before he got to the?
He was a
kind
bit
of-
magical, but not as magical
That's
as
why
he
they
is.
kicked him out.
Yeah, he got too involved in his books. So he was, I guess it could be a bit of double entendre there, because he was early on in his art, in the development of his art, and he definitely had some power then. Now he has Ariel as well. That's a huge amount of extra power. But he had that political power, and so it's transcended into supernatural magical power.
And I have another question. If he
Yeah.
was practicing magic, why wasn't he killed? Because wouldn't that be like heresy?
But he's a man.
Yeah, but like men still got killed in like the witch trials.
Yeah,
and
they
stuff.
did. 4 men got killed during the witch
Well,
trials.
Like, and if it's like this has a lot of like,
Well, they were going to, remember they were going to,
because like the play has a lot of like biblical stuff in
Did
it as well.
Did Shakespeare put it rather as them kicking him out
yeah.
and rather than killing him simply because he was going to end it with forgiveness?
Well, no, what was going to happen? Gonzalo was in charge of their kidnapping, so they were supposed to be sent off to some far off, horrible place, maybe even thrown overboard. We don't know what was going to befall their fate. It was something that was not good. And Gonzalo took pity upon them and got them like safe passage to wherever to the island, obviously, but not.
That was just like
Intended.
the whole time. I was like, if he's like magical and they're like, and this is like in the Elizabethan
Well, that's-
era,
yeah.
like, wouldn't he be like an illegal like devil kind of thing?
Yeah. Well, Sebastian, that's how he turned people against Prospero because of his magic.
But like then at the end they still forgive him, but like they still know that he did all this like magic stuff.
But I don't think did they say he was going back to Milan with them at the end?
Yeah, he said he was
Yeah.
the Duke of Milan again.
Well, I don't know. Maybe political time.
But it's a play. It's
yeah,
not
I know
real
it's a
life.
play, but like if the play has like all this like stuff, like it,
Yeah.
reflects like the political stuff.
So maybe they're just scared of him. Like, and then also the focus is on Miranda and Ferdinand. The focus is on that Ferdinand's alive. You're not really going to be thinking about, and they've realised that they've done him wrong. So,
But,
I mean,
like,
maybe
did
when
they
they
really
get
do
back.
him wrong if he was like this like thing that went against their religion? Like, would it have been like the custom of the time?
Probably. But then think about how powerful he was as well. So it's like Henry VIII started his own church. Almost were big then.
Yeah,
And they were they were scientific, but they were like magical, trying to.
yeah, because like again, like with the witch thing, they're like made like devil
But then
things,
again, they
but he practices like the same magic and also enslaved Ariel, but he's treated like.
But the difference is as well that Shakespeare makes mention of it in Macbeth as well. Despite the fact that the witches weren't actual people, magic was still there, and it was
Yeah, but they were called hags. They still weren't true to
It was
them.
in
They were
a
still
mix.
like devil things.
And
Yeah.
in Midsummer Night's Dream, what about the fairies?
Yeah, they're painted in a fairly positive light.
Yeah, they're not like witches or like wizards.
But they still
Yeah.
had power over the elements.
But
of the
then
world.
also think about the fact that it's entertainment. So
But, like, would it have been like entertaining if they were like so against like witchcraft?
but if you so people that were against witchcraft were mainly religious people, and religious people frowned upon Shakespeare's theatre. So there was a lot of sort of contextual factors that kind of overlook the fact that think about movies today. They're essentially the same thing. A play is the same as a movie today. It's entertainment. How many things do you see in a movie where you're like, that wouldn't happen? Thy mother was a piece of virtue. Again, virtue. Just saying, focus of virtue. Focus. And princess no worse issued. So highlight princess no worse issued. Find out Miranda is a princess. Okay, and then just can you go in brackets Elizabethan romance? So that's a convention of Elizabethan romance. Princesses in far off places. My heart bleeds to think the teen that I have turned you to, which is from my remembrance, please you, Father. Okay, so in this Prospero's monologue, I'll just do a bracket across the whole thing. My brother and thy uncle called Antonio, I pray thee mark me that a brother should be so perfidious. Can you highlight that a brother should be so perfidious? So Prospero still has vengeance on his mind. So Just highlight vengeance, right vengeance. Prospero the Prime Duke, being so reputed in dignity, and for the liberal arts without a parallel. Can you highlight for the liberal arts without a parallel? Those being all my study. Prospero is stuffed up. He was Duke of Milan, who was supposed to be ruling the people and making sure everything was going according to plan. And instead of doing that, he decided to go and be magical and study magic, the liberal arts, liberal meaning you can do whatever you want, and let Antonio run the government side of things. But think about what Antonio was getting out of it. Do you think he would be getting? Does he get a title? Does Antonio get any type of title? Even though he's doing the job that Prospero should be doing.
So it's kind of justified that he got kicked out of his.
So it's almost like it's arguably, I mean, not the manner in which he was,
Yeah, like not getting kicked off into like an island.
but that he wasn't fulfilling his duties as a duke. He was too busy with his art. He said he loved his brother, and they were close. But then he let his brother do all the work of governing. But it seems like Antonio got very little out of that.
So like Prospero's like very power hungry. He liked having the title and the power, but he
Yeah.
didn't want to do what.
It's not fulfilling his duke.
Then how come Antonio is such like a mean person?
Yeah.
If he's doing stuff for his brother, or did, but he was so mean on the ship.
Well, maybe
Or is that
Prospero's
because
not
of
as nice as what
Sebastian?
Yeah, and like
we
with the
think.
thing how he's like, I'll do the same thing to your brother. Is that like?
But Antonio
that
wanted to
Alonso-
stay with the king, and Sebastian said, let's go.
Yeah.
So does that mean that Sebastian is influencing Antonio?
Potentially, yeah. And we can say that there's a grain of morality in Antonio. So yeah, and for liberal arts without a parallel, so he's very good at it, those being all my study, the government I cast upon my brother. And to my state grew stranger, being transported and wrapped in secret studies. Thy false uncle, and this says, dost thou attend me? So basically, Prospero became too involved in his study of magic. So it was a lack of awareness about what was going on around him. Now, why does he say, dost thou attend me?
It's checking if she's paying attention.
Yeah, she's checking if Miranda's paying attention, but think about back in Shakespeare's time. How was it performed?
The clue.
The Globe Theatre, okay? Who was down the bottom?
The like peasants.
The groundlings, okay? Do you think they would have just been like this?
No.
Listening? No. They would have been loud and rowdy, and they might not have been able to hear
They
properly.
understood like Shakespearean language. Did like
I think,
because like if they're like the poor people, like
and Shakespeare invented so many words.
yeah, like did they actually understand what was going on?
When he's asking if she's listening to him, he's also checking that. It's also a technique to check the audience's highlights. He was the ivy which had hid my princely trunk, and sucked my verdure out on it. So, Antonio had just turned all the nobles against Prospero easily enough. I wouldn't have thought it would be very hard because
Well, if he was
Prospero.
a good ruler, it would have been more difficult to turn everyone against him.
Exactly. So he would have used the magic thing. I think a lot of people would have been a bit concerned about that. And also the fact that Antonio had been ruling probably quite successfully, governing the state of affairs in Milan. And he would just be saying, well, I've been doing this job for like the last, let's say, 3 years, making that up. You can trust me to do it well. We need to get rid of Prospero because he's just dangerous or whatever he's saying to them. Okay, so Antonio turning nobles against Prospero. A discovery of the situation. Obviously metaphor for Antonio's duplicitous and opportunistic nature. I thus neglecting worldly ends, all dedicated to closeness and the bettering of my mind. He said he admits that he neglected worldly ends. Okay, admits that he neglected his duties. I'll overprized, all popular in my false brother, await an evil nature, and my trust like a good parent to beget of him, a falsehood and contrary as great my trust was. So in my false brother awaked an evil nature. So somehow he's changed. Power changed Antonio. Power and jealousy.
It could be just like also a thing to like get Miranda to just believe that Prospero was great and that Antonio was evil.
Yeah. Could be to influence Miranda. Not only what my revenue yielded, but what my power might else extract, like the wine having its truth. He did believe he was indeed the Duke, out of the substitution and executing the outward face of royalty with all prerogative, hence his ambition growing. So basically, because Prospero had given him the job of ruling Milan, pretty much, he started to believe that he was the Duke. My library was dukedom large enough of temporal royalties, he thinks me now incapable. So, magic was not valued in Milan. Magic and learning of his art, not valued. So he's like, because he's angry about how they didn't value his power, he's like, well, I'll show you now. So basically he turned the king against him as well. Now the condition the king of Naples, being an enemy to me, inveterate, hearkens my brother's suit. It was Alonso who expatriated. Alonso was responsible for removing Prospero. A treacherous army levied one midnight, fated to the purpose did Antonio open the gates of Milan, and in the dead of darkness the ministers for purpose hurried thence, me and thy crying self. So he was taken out. He wasn't being put to death though, but Miranda basically helped him stay alive. A noble Neapolitan Gonzalo, out of his charity, did give us rich garments. Highlight from a noble Neapolitan Gonzalo. Discovery of Gonzalo's character. So he resumes his mantle. She asks him his reason for raising the storm. By accident most strange, bountiful fortune hath mine enemies brought to this shore. Can you go from, so Prospero's is about two-thirds of the way down. By accident most strange, up to a most auspicious star. Discovery of their proximity allowed Prospero to set his plan in place. We've got personification and metaphor in there. So we discover Ariel. Away, servant, come. I'm ready now. So Ariel is a servant. That's linked to colonialism. All hail, great master, grave sir, hail. To answer thy best pleasure I come. Okay, again, link that to servitude. Ariel.
It also shows you her conformative nature.
Yeah. And obedient. Okay, and then to swim, to dive into the fire, to ride on the curled clouds, shows that Ariel is a powerful spirit. Discovery of magic.